wind howled off the shivering sea, dragging sheets of hard, glittering snow across the King's Road and flinging them against the armored column that inched northward through gathering dusk. Horses and men pressed on in crouched silence, cloaks crusted white, the iron rings beneath stiff as bark. Each breath froze before it left a mouth. Above, cloud wounds tore open for a heartbeat, revealing stars like chips of hoarfrost ground into black glass, then closed again, smothering the night in bruised purple gloom. Stannis Baratheon rode at the fore, beneath a flag of his heart in flame, half hidden by wind-lashed snow. Yet on this march the cloth mattered less than the air around him. His men felt it as plainly as they felt the chill. An aura of flint resolve, sharp edges under winter's glove. For 12 days they had plodded north from Deepwood Motte, supply wagons creaking, hooves breaking ice that refroze behind them, all to reach the rising ground west of Winterfell, before Ramsay Bolton could fully gird the old castle. The king wore no crown, only a plain steel half-helm. Frost feathered the rim where his breath met metal. He kept his gauntleted hand on the reins, and his eyes on the white blindness beyond the vanguard. To the right, Lord Peasbury muttered prayers to whatever southern god still bothered to fly this far north. To the left, Sir Godry Faring tugged his cloak tight, cheeks red as boiled beetroot. Davos Seaworth, hood drawn low, rode a length behind them, the spidery fingers of his shortened hand throbbing in the cold. A distant thrum answered the wind, war drums echoing off snow-hushed woods. Ramsay's banners were somewhere out there, stitched with the flayed man of House Bolton, but sound carried oddly in storms. Stannis held up one mailed fist. The column halted, hooves stamping frost. "Scouts?" he asked without turning, the word rasping like flint on steel. A lean shadow slid beside him. Sir Richard Horpe, cheeks silvered with hoarfrost. Bolton's outriders hugged the ridge 1 mile ahead, 30 at least, shifting in and out of the trees. They light no fires, but we spied torches at their rear. Another host digs pits across your chosen ground. Mission. Stannis nodded once, sharp as a sword stroke. Let them labor. He dismounted, boots crunching on crusted snow, and studied the dark swell of hills where Winterfell's ancient walls should loom. He saw only swirling gray. The king turned to his commanders gathering beside the standard. "We camp here, shields on the southern flank, wagons in the hollow." Some faces flickered with relief. An end to the march, if only for a night, but none dared voice it. They dispersed quietly, barking orders that were whipped away on wind. At Stannis' side lingered only Davos. "My king," the Onion Knight said, voice low. The men freeze on their feet. Fires will draw Bolton eyes, yet without them, Bolton eyes are drawn already. Stannis' breath spiraled white from his lips. "Let him see our resolve. Frost bites man and horse alike. We abide, he shivers. By dawn we dig before the ridge and force him from his holes." He paused, gaze distant. "The north will judge who bends first." Across the camp, soldiers unpacked pickaxes, driving points into ground that clanged like iron. Horses whickered, steam rising off their hides. Men huddled behind wagons for the meager shield from wind. No songs rose. The only rhythm was steel on earth, and the muffled thunder of Bolton drums upwind. Night deepened, a velvet drenched in ink. Davos moved among the ranks, murmuring grit into flagging ears, reminding men of storms and sieges, of Blackwater's burning river. He offered half smiles despite the numbness gnawing his cheeks. When he returned to Stannis' command tent, little more than a patched canvas sewn to a wagon's leeward side, Melisandre of Ashai already waited, red silk a splash of blood against white wilderness. Her ruby choker pulsed faintly. Heartbeat slow. "The snow thickens because your enemy prays to the false gods of flayed flesh," she said, voice carrying the hush of embers. "R'hllor's warmth is distant here, yet not dead. Only hidden beneath blankets of fear." Stannis removed his gauntlets, flexing stiff fingers over a lantern's feeble tongue of fire. "Fear? Bolton knows only fury and cruelty." "Inelna," Aelai men tell themselves, the priestess replied. "Even monsters fear the night. At dawn, show him a truer darkness." Across the lantern's glow, Davos met her crimson eyes and glimpsed reflections dancing. Shadows of burning skins, flares of shattered ice, a white wolf prowling crimson snow. He looked away. Stannis traced a map head etched in frozen dirt atop a wooden board. The ridge, the iced god's eye lakelet, the pinch between copses where he meant to channel Bolton's cavalry. "They think us broken by winter," he muttered. "Yet winter serves impartial masters. Hunger and firewood, Ramsay's stocks dwindle within Winterfell, just as ours do here. The difference lies in will." Melisandre's smile was slow, secret, and in truth. "The Lord of Light favors those who burn brightest." Stannis answered only with a grunt, yet Davos noted the tension in his jaw loosen, if only a hair. He spread a blanket across the board, smothering the map, lest wind freeze over it again, and stepped outside into stinging dark. Morning was a gray smudge behind swirling ice needles, but Stannis' host stirred long before first light. Pickaxes rang, shovels bit. Trenches took shape like claw marks across the slope south of the ridge. Spearmen lined the inner banks, sheathing points in boiled leather against the cold. Archers strung ashwood boughs beside wicker baskets of arrows capped in rag and pitch, ready to be kindled should the order come. The warrior sons of House Baratheon, what remained of them, held the center, shields overlapping, the crowned stag emblazoned in sooty gold that the falling snow soon buried. To either flank, Northmen newly sworn clasped rusty mail, uncertain eyes darting, wondering whether they fought for a stranger or for a king, promised by their own old gods. Davos stood with them, offering nods and knuckled salutes. These mountain clans, Nori, Little, Burly, had answered Stannis' summons after he freed Deepwood from Ironborn reavers. They feared Boltons more than they trusted Southerners, but fear proved strong binding. Horns wailed on the ridge above. Through the gloom advanced a ragged line of riders, shields pale pink beneath flakes. The flayed man. Ramsay's outriders brandished torches smeared with pitch, wave flash of orange against endless gray. They fell into trot, mocking cheers drifting down the slope. Behind them bristled pikes and footmen in mismatched armor, mounds of snow sloughing off as they formed serried ranks. Stannis rode before his trenches, sword raised just high enough for his own men to see the steel catch light. No speech left his lips. His armies knew what they faced. Instead, he pointed northward. A single trumpet answered, thin and cold. Banners dipped. Bolton cavalry swept either wing, seeking open snowfields. They did not know of the pits Stannis men had carved and crudely hidden with willow boughs under drifts. They found them soon. Horses shrieking as legs snapped, riders flung into spears of packed ice. Chaos shattered the neat curve of their charge. Then the sky cracked thunder. Crossbow volleys, quarrels hissing like sleet. Stannis archers replied with flame-tipped arrows, streaking orange serpents that kissed fur-lined shields and torch-scorched cloaks alike. In falling snow, the flames looked blurred, surreal sparks inside a half-remembered dream. Ramsay's infantry slogged into the uphill march, boots crunching crust, breath pluming gray. They raised shields when they neared bowshot, but Stannis men lobbed firepots that exploded in copper bursts, spraying lamp oil fire across frozen surfaces, melting snow to slush that swallowed ankles. Screams rose higher, a harmony of terror. Yet Bolton banners still advanced, prodded by the cruelty of their lord. Davos found a vantage near the center, his shortened fingers gripping a borrowed shield. He watched the first collision like a smith inspecting temper, the hammer blow of wave on cliff. Spears bristled forward, Boltons crashed, and suddenly winter itself seemed to exhale. Steam, blood, snow swirling in vortex. Stannis' voice cut through, steely as the blade he swung. Close the gap. Shields thrust, ranks compressed. Each foot forward felt like marching through two mice, yet they moved. A rider burst from Bolton's rear line, pale smiled beneath a skullcap helm, eyes bright with malice. Ramsay Snow? Bastard no more. Astride a smoky stallion lashed raw at the flanks. He carried a curved flaying knife in place of lance. He sought chaos, dancing along Stannis' right. searching for a weak seam. He found instead a wall of northern axes. The little clansmen hurled themselves at his stirrups, hacking at the horse's legs. The beast toppled, hooves thrashing. Ramsay rolled free, blade flashing, laughing even as blood stained snow. Stannis spurred forward, his destrier pushing through slush and writhing men. Sword met knife with a ring that hushed nearby screams. Ramsay's grin widened. He darted, feinted, struck like a weasel. Stannis' strokes were heavier, deliberate, each one meant to break rather than wound. Time shrank to breath and heartbeat. Davos watched from yards away, powerless shield forgotten at his boots. Ramsay's knife traced a line across Stannis of embrace, sparks jumping. Stannis riposted, pommel smashing cheek, sending the bastard staggering. Snow churned beneath them, red mud by another name. Ramsay slipped, one knee plunging into slush. Stannis' sword rose overhead, caught a stray flare of pale dawn light, and fell, shearing through fur, leather, flesh. Blood pumped black under gray skies. The laughter died on Ramsay's lips, replaced by a hiss of disbelief. Silence claimed a circle around them. Gray wind cut through armor gaps, slicing warmth from skin. Stannis nudged the corpse with his boot, then looked up at the Bolton banners blowing limp as dead leaves. A horn of surrender wailed, a ragged, beaten sound. Bolton men fell back, some casting shields aside. Others knelt where they stood, numb with shock. Stannis raised his sword high. A roar answered, born from northern throats and southern, mingled like two rivers meeting in flood. 2 days later, Winterfell's gates groaned open. Snowdrifts banked high against the ramparts, where flayed men had once hung in grisly parody of banners. They were gone now, taken down by Stannis' order. Too many dead already. The king rode beneath the gatehouse, Davos at his shoulder, Melisandre gliding ghost-like behind. The courtyard smelled of wet ash and singed pork. Fires still crackled in pits where Bolton corpses burned. A kindness for the frozen earth would not yield graves until spring. Northern lords gathered on the steps of the great keep. Jonas Bracken in a patched bearskin, Arnulf Karstark with sorrow-bruised eyes, Wyman Manderly leaning on a cane. They bent the knee, one by one, their breath fogging around words like, "Your Grace," and "King of the Seven Kingdoms." Stannis accepted, face carved from granite. He spoke little only. The North is restored. Yet the words carried weight like an avalanche, irresistible, undeniable. Inside the hall, ravens scattered from rafters under torchlight. Dried blood streaked the stone where Ramsay's hounds had fought for scraps. Flags of House Bolton were heaped in a corner, awaiting the torch. In their place, Davos unfurled the crowned stag entwined in a fiery heart. But beside it hung another, the gray direwolf of Stark. For the North remembered. Stannis climbed the dais and settled on the high seat, carved of weirwood and black oak. Melisandre stood at his right hand, ruby pulsing. Davos took his left, fingers tracing absent scars. "All men may look upon this seat," Stannis declared, voice echoing off blackened beams, "and know the price of treachery. The usurpers of Winterfell are gone. The night is long and full of terrors, but together we shall endure." Yao Hori. Outside, snow kept falling, gentle now, as though winter itself paused to watch. Fires flickered on ramparts, lighting banners that snapped in new wind. Somewhere in the kennels, a lone hound howled. Half mourning, half wild with scents of change. Ravens cawed from broken mazes of stone, and in distant woods north of the wall, icy blue eyes stirred, watching flames rise where flayed men once hung. Darkness gathered beyond sight, patient, ancient, as though Stannis Baratheon had merely taken one step upon a road that stretched into endless snow wastes where thrones were made of ice, not oak, and crowns rusted in the cold. Yet within Winterfell's walls, hearths were being lit again. Children peeked from lofts, seeing a king who did not smile but who stood unbowed beneath the weight of winter. Sword gripped in a scarred fist. Hope, like a small ember buried in ash, glimmered, and the North, battered and bleeding, dared breathe once more. A.K. Wind prowled the courtyard of Winterfell for 3 unbroken days, raising mournful voices in every arrow slit and broken shutter. But life within the walls refused to still. By the 4th dawn, wagons groaned across the drawbridge, each axle whining under barrels of salt beef hauled from Deepwood and casks of pickled cod brought over the King's Road in frozen spurts. Teams of shaggy garrons strained through drifts that reached a man's waist. Northern drivers cursed and clucked, slapping reins with hands in boiled leather mitts. Atop the gatehouse, newly posted watchmen beat iron chests with mailed fists to keep blood moving. They stared south between snow squalls for the faintest blot that might be an oncoming host, though none had ventured from Dreadfort or Barrowton since news of Ramsay's fall galloped across the barrows on a dozen half-broken survivors. Inside the great hall, scaffolds rose like spare ribs along cracked pillars, while masons in gray cloaks chipped away bolted nails, anchoring fresh oak beams where fire had blackened stone. Wolves' heads once flayed and nailed above the hearth were gone. In their place, raw timbers waited for stags and deer wolves to be carved anew when the weather eased. The hall smelled of sawdust, damp wool, and horse sweat, but it smelled of hope too. A scent as fragile as candle smoke in the gale, yet unmistakable to any half-starved soul who breathed it. Stannis Baratheon sat his seat not on the dais, where ancient Stark lords had passed judgment since before the Doom, but on a plain oaken bench dragged to the hall's center, so every voice would reach him without bowing heads. His crown lay untouched in a lockbox. He governed wrapped in a black bearskin cloak and grim patience. Davos Seaworth kept tally beside him, scratching names and oaths on parchment sheets that curled the moment ink met cold. Peaceberry confirmed grain stores. Horp counted spears. Godry Farron checked black powder and pitch. Yet still Stannis demanded numbers for boots, for mules, for copper rivets to mend shattered mail. He heard every lord's grievance. Manderley's claim of knotted river ice halting barges, Glover's plea for smiths to reforge gate hinges, Karstark's quiet sorrow over sons misled into treason. When arguments flared, he quenched them with a stare sharper than sword edge. When men wept, aye, hard men, north-born and south, he let them finish before handing down command like iron nails to bind their hurt into purpose. By lantern light on the first night he convened a war council in the solar abandoned since Theon Greyjoy's brief tyranny. The stone still bore soot from that summer's fires, but shutters had been replaced and a brazier's glow painted the faces ranged around a scarred map table. Wyman Manderley, immense in furs, breathed like a smithy. His cousin Sir Marlon stood near, narrowing eyes at any mention of Bolton loyalists. Lord Harwood, stout, and Sir Justin Massey flanked a pile of raven messages, reading aloud tales of scattered Dreadfort men, looting crofters' huts along the weeping water. They disagreed on pursuit. Massey urged swift iron, Stout urged conserving strength. Stannis listened with arms folded, lips thinning, before tapping the map. Winterfell's walls keep wolves at bay, but winter is our truest foe, he said. Bolton stragglers will freeze faster than we spend steel, unless they band under Roose. We secure roads, gather food, and hammer any band that grows too large. We do not fritter lives chasing shadows in every coppice. Aye, your grace, said Davos, though worry tugged his brow. He had read the north on his rides, abandoned crofts, snow-buried fields, barns gutted of grain. Yet he knew better than to quarrel publicly with the king whose stubborn flint had cracked storms and siege once. Still, when council ended and torches smoked low, he risked quiet words by the brazier. The men speak of supplies dwindling come first thaw, he told Stannis. Rations stretch thin. We might beg White Harbor's stores. Wyman Manderley would fatten his fame feeding a king. Beg? Stannis' bark of a laugh had no mirth. I command. Yet I would not empty his vaults while my own wagons sit idle. Tomorrow ride for White Harbor, Davos. Take the letters I penned. Secure fish, grain, shipwrights if he has them idle. Promise fair coin, southern spices. My favor when summer returns. Whatever convinces his accountants. But promise swiftly. We need food before the snows climb another stone on these bloody walls. Sir Shimar. Davos bowed, the gesture stiff in frost-stiff leather, then retreated to pack. That night, He lay awake in a tiny chamber above the old kitchens, listening to winds thrash shutters like siege rams. In darkness, he felt the ache of missing finger bones, and prayed softly to a god he scarcely believed in, asking only that Melisandre keep her red eyes off Shireen until he returned. The priestess walked winter corridors like a living ember trailing sparks upon dusty reed rushes. Where she passed, guards straightened and maids shrank back, muttering of dragon breath warmth blooming in her wake. She spent hours in the collapsed septi, clearing snow from cracked flagstones until a circle of soot-soaked granite lay bare. There, at dawn on the second day, she raised a pyre of dead weirwood roots stolen from an overgrown godswood grove outside the eastern wall. No drumming, no chanting, only the hiss of frozen sap boiling from timber as flames took hold. Smoke rose thin and purple into an uncaring sky. Shireen Baratheon watched from a balcony window overlooking the ward, her half-ruined cheek pressed to frost-clouded glass. At 12 she had felt hunger and fear enough to call herself grown. Yet something in that solitary fire unsettled her more than any memory of King's Landing. She slipped from the balcony and found her father in the great keep library, where he scowled over ledgers by candlestub. "Father, must we burn trees that serve the old gods?" she asked, voice trembling. The northern folk whisper of curses on those who fell weirwoods. Stannis set quill aside. Superstition. The trees are dead long centuries, choked by neglect. We burn rot, nothing more. But Lady Melisandre stares into the flames as if they speak, Shireen said. Stannis' jaw date. Flames do not speak. Men hear what they wish. You will not fear embers, daughter. You will fear failing your duty. That alone. Nanny. Shireen nodded, though uncertainty lingered like ash on her tongue. She left the library and found solace with Maester Tybalt, a gray little man so new that ravens refused his gloved hand. He taught her northern histories, while they warmed themselves over kettles of spiced mead, too weak for grown soldiers. Together, they traced the lineage of Stark kings and the bleak catastrophes of early winter invasions. Shireen noted every famine that followed wars fought under falling snow, and by dusk, a grim pattern etched itself on the parchment of her heart. Davos rode hard through blinding squalls, a small escort clattering behind. 3 mounted guards in Karstark colors and a sellsword archer named Saoirse, whose bowstring sang soft laments each night by the fire. They reached White Harbor's watchtower in 5 days, despite drifts cresting to shoulders, aided by Mandarine patrols plowing the main road with lines of chained oxen. Towers of the new castle loomed like white ghosts above the harbor mouth, smoke from 1,000 chimneys merging with the storm to shroud the upper battlements. Lord Wyman met Davos in a counting house that smelled of fish oil and beeswax. Account scribes rustled vellum behind lattice screens, trying to keep quills from freezing. The Lord's girth filled a sealskin chair, his eyes bright as polished jade above a beard larded with crumbs of sugarcake. "Onion Knight," he cried, rising slow as an old tide. "You sail roads of snow now, it seems. Come, warm yourself. I saved the finest lamprey pies for your arrival." "No." Davos bowed, presenting Stannis sealed letters. "Your lordship's generosity precedes him like the old kraken in song. Winterfell lives on hope and fishbones these days. Perhaps you'll send us the one to fill the other." A chuckle rolled out of Wyman like a drum beat. He broke Stannis' seal, eyes darting across lines of neat script. When he finished, he steepled fingers fat as sausages. "His Grace asks fair price and fair pledge," he said. "White Harbor can spare grain. Our silos lie deep in the cliff rock, cool and dry. Cod and eel aplenty. Even a dozen shipwrights idle since the Merman's Pride reached Braavos in the spring can shape timber for bridges. Yet coin alone does not warm throats in winter. Oaths do." He tapped the parchment. "He swears to seat a Stark once more, with lordship of Winterfell under the crown." "Has he named which Stark?" "Not yet," Davos admitted. "The king weighs options. Rickon remains lost on Skagos, or perhaps dead. Sansa's fate uncertain beyond veiled rumors. Arya vanished. Jon Snow is Lord Commander on the Wall, Sworn until death, or till death ends swearing." He allowed a tight smile. "But typical of his grace, he will not promise what he cannot yet deliver." "Wise," Wyman murmured, though his gaze harbored storms. "The North hungers for its bloodline. We remember." He signed the trade charter nonetheless, stamping crimson wax with a merman clasping trident. "Tell Stannis Baratheon House, Manderly feeds his host. 10 wagons of grain a 10-day, escorted by my knights, until vernal equinox or his victory, whichever sets sooner. But guard those wagons well. The snows breed thieves as fast as hunger breeds anger." Davos thanked him, warmth swelling behind his ribs. Before departing, he visited the docks where carpenters caulked hulls under canvas tents. He found men willing to follow him north, and others skilled at shaping pine planks into shield faces. He loaded his escort with charts, ledgers, and a bushel of sweet winter apples for Shireen. Then he struck for Winterfell through weather so thick, the world reduced to gray corridors between moving walls of ice. More than once his escort carried axes to chop free a horse half buried overnight. But they pressed on, reading Manderly flag markers that bobbed from snowdrifts like lonely beacons. When Winterfell's pale towers emerged at last, Davos saw banners multiplied. Karstark sunbursts beside Glover pines, Serwyn battle axes, Hornwood moose. Fires burned on ramparts, and the gatehouse beams bore fresh marks where carpenters had planed away Bolton brands. The Onion Knight breathed relief deep in lungs raw with cold. Inside, Stannis received the charter without flourish. "A start," he said. Yet a flicker of satisfaction warmed the corners of his eyes. "Manderly keeps his word, for now. We will honor our." He pinned the documents to the hall's notice board for every lord to see. That evening, they dined on bread, thicker than wafers, boiled cod, and turnip stew. The meal tasted better than any feast Davos remembered, though oil lanterns hissed like serpents overhead. Conversation hummed low. Talk of wagon schedules, of sentries sighting fires near the King's Road Fort. Knights jostled for right to lead patrols, hungry for laurels. Shireen recited a line of northern poetry about snow burying old grudges. The men listened, charmed despite themselves. Yet all sweetness curdled when trumpets blared past midnight. A rider flagged with night's watch. Black pounded across the drawbridge. Horse lathered, eyes white. Guards dragged him half-frozen before Stannis, where he collapsed on stone, hands cracked to blood. "Your Grace," he gasped. "Castle Black." "Lord Commander Snow begs aid." Wildlings settle at the wall's shadow, uneasy deity. But worse, White Walkers prowl the Frostfangs. "We spied dead men marching in moonlight. He sends ravens yet fears, wings freeze, before they beat halfway south." Matabe. Stannis dismissed the watchman to the kitchens and gathered his lords in the map room, before the messenger's words quit echo. Davos read the fatigue lining every face. To march south against Roose or east against the weeping water seemed hard enough. But north to the wall? Overpasses clogged with snow, into night realms where legends sharpened teeth. Silence reigned until Melisandre stepped from a shadowed archway as if born of smoke. "The false night closes," she said, scarlet silk rustling. "The prince that was promised stands at the crossroads of ice and war." Her eyes fixed on Stannis with fervor bright as furnace coals. "Ride, and the Lord of Light will lift your hand to victory eternal." Murmurs rippled, some fearful, some awed. Davos felt hair prickle on his neck. He remembered the shadow in the Stormlands, the one that killed a king's brother. He remembered a leech bursting in flame at Dragonstone and Joffrey choking purple days later. But he also remembered salt winds and barge smoke. He knew miracles could be illusions shaped by cunning tongues. Stannis' lips drew into a thin line. "We have sworn to secure the north," he said slowly. "Winterfell cannot be left unguarded while I chase phantoms." Melisandre's ruby pulsed. "Not phantoms, death incarnate." Wyman Manderly thumped a fist on the table, setting wooden horse markers trembling. "My king, White Walkers belong to tales we frighten little ones with. Winter's wights may prowl barrow mounds, but no flesh and blood has spied their kind in 8,000 years." "The watchman just did," Davos said, voice soft. And I've heard the wall's horns blow thrice myself, years past when I ran smuggler wine to East Watch under cloak of dusk. Men do not sound that third blast for jest. A hush followed. Outside, wind keened around tower corners, like a ghost that had forgotten its name. Stannis looked to the iron chandelier, to the guttering candles melting icicles on its arms, and at last to the direwolf banner across the hall. Gray on white, a promise older than southern crowns. Very well, he said. We split our strength. Sir Justin holds Winterfell with 2/3 the host. Lord Manderley remains to marshal grain and finish these walls. I ride north with the mounted companies, and every man of Shireen's choosing who dares the cold for glory. We leave 3 days hence at first light. Then Sir Betormor. Arguments leaped up like sparks off a brand, but he crushed them. Orders flew. Messengers sought volunteers among clans. Glover men sharpened saw-teeth axes for road clearing. Women baked journey bread dense as stone. Stable hands shod horses anew, hammer blows ringing through night. Shireen pleaded to join, but Stannis forbade her gently, pressing a palm to her mottled cheek. Rule Winterfell in my stead, he told her. Learn these halls, these people. A princess is safest when useful. The words sounded stern, yet she caught the pride there and straightened shoulders like a sparrow puffing against gale. She promised to study each house's bannerman and greet every supply patrol with thanks measured to their wagon's weight. As departure neared, Melisandre whispered in Stannis' chamber that victory demanded sacrifice. She spoke of king's blood and the purity of fire. No one knew what passed between them in that hush of scarlet candlelight. But servants later claimed the king emerged pale, as though he had glimpsed the bone-white smile of death inside the flame and decided to walk toward it nonetheless. The column that rolled through Winterfell's gate 2 mornings later was lean and sharp, like a spear point broken from its haft yet deadly still. 500 cavalry led, their mounts clad in leather drapes stitched with sigils rough and hastily smeared in pitch against sleet. Behind them trudged Sellswords and Karstark halberdiers, Glover scouts on lank northern ponies, and a thin cart train with salted mutton, barley, and lard. Sir Justin watched from ramparts while Shireen stood beside him, small hand dwarfed by his gauntlet. As her father passed beneath, she raised a gloved fist in silent salute. Stannis answered with the slightest nod, the gesture weightier than 100 southern bows. Davos rode near the vanguard, cloak snapping like torn sailcloth. His thoughts wandered beyond the next drift to a wall higher than any mast he'd ever climbed, to wildlings and walkers, to Jon Snow, bastard no more. Perhaps the Stark the North awaited. He pictured the young commander's eyes as cold as the icy guarded, yet bright with a fire that names could not extinguish. Stannis sensed it too, Davos guessed. A flicker of something inside Snow that echoed ages-old prophecies whispered by Melisandre. Whether that prophecy named King or Champion of Light, Davos could not say. He only knew the North's fate now hinged on more than battles against treacherous Boltons. It hinged on an enemy older than loyalty, older than thrones, older even than the very walls the Starks had raised to keep dark from swallowing dawn. Behind him the gates clanged shut, echoing like doom. Within their embrace, Shireen exhaled mist-white breath, whispering prayer to any god gentle enough to guard a stubborn king. Within hours she turned her focus to the ledgers, marking barley stores received that morning, instructing maids to heat stones for sick men's beds, teaching orphans drifting in with patrols to read the letters carved on new wooden shields. And thus the North beat on through the howl of winter, half its heart riding into frost-bitten night behind a banner of burning stag, the other half nursing embers inside walls reborn. Wolves ranged the godswood once more, howling to a sky bruised purple. Ravens flocked on rookery beams, black quills trembling, as if aware something stirring far beyond the woods. Snow kept falling, but fires kept burning, and in each flicker a choice glimmered between fear and fight, between surrender to the cold or meeting it with flint and iron and a spark that refused to die. On the 5th night of the march north, the column bivouacked at Queen's Crown ruins, half buried under drifts. Tents sprouted like gray mushrooms. Horses stamped, tails whipping ice. Davos huddled in a windbreak fashioned of broken stone, sharing stew thickened with suet. Sir Godry Farring carved runes into his shield, claiming ward against wights. Scouts returned too numb for speech, but one dropped to knees before Stannis' fire and rasped. "My lord, we found tracks larger than any man's. 5 leagues east near Agger's Ridge. Dead men's prints inside shuffling drag marks. No warm blood among them." Stannis' mouth settled like a closing vice. He ordered double watches, fires banked low, every man to sleep in mail. Snow spatters hissed on flames. Melisandre stood beyond the glow, face flush with something fiercer than heat. She stretched palms to the sky as if summoning dawn from the bottomless dark. When sparks whirled upward, she whispered names only she knew, and the sparks seemed to linger, pulsing a moment before vanishing, as though some unseen wind plucked them one by one. Within tents, men muttered of stone dragons and shadow babes, of flames that feasted on souls, yet none raised voice loud enough to carry. Fear traveled faster than frost that night. Davos clutched a carving Shireen had given him. A stag and a direwolf nodded tails, whittled from heart-tree driftwood, and prayed for the girl's dreams to stay sunlit. Another day's ride brought them to the village of Mole's Town, wholly abandoned. Tools lay frozen where they'd fallen, ale barrels split by cold, doors unhinged. In cellars, they found fleshless bones gnawed to splinters, and remembered the tales of cannibal thens. They burned the remains, smoke blowing south toward Winterfell, a bleak herald of what awaited the unprepared. Past midday horns from the wall reached them, faint yet thrice repeated. Stannis ordered a gallop despite drifting snow. Ice cracked beneath hooves as they thundered down the King's Road valley. The wall reared ahead at last, colossal, devouring half the sky, a fortress of nightmares and promise, blue-white and slick where moonlight bled across its face. At the gate of Castle Black, they met Jon Snow, cloak whipped into tatters by wind. His gray eyes surveyed the newcomers, and for a beat Davos sensed twin storms collide. The iron will of a king who believed righteousness his birthright, and the quiet defiance of a bastard whose vows outweighed crowns. Snow welcomed them, but there was caution in his greeting, a candor that admitted need yet guarded independence. Inside the old chapel, Stannis' captain stripped gloves, letting numb fingers thaw so ink could flow. They listened as Jon recounted white attacks along the Milkwater, how his rangers fought corpses that rose thrice even after heads were taken. They heard of a girl in tattered furs whose baby quickened when White Walkers drew near, only to cease crying when dawn came. They heard of Hardhome screamed to ruin by armies of ice without ships or siege ladders, carried on tidal waves of despair. Some scoffed, some crossed themselves, but Stannis listened with the same stillness he lent to carpenters and beggars. When Jon finished, he asked only one question: "How far until they stand beneath this wall?" "Closer each night, your grace," Snow answered. "I see torch glow atop my hill camps, and pray it is my men. Yet sometimes the flames burn blue. Me." Melisandre's breath escaped in a soft sigh, like a lover's release. She stepped forward, her ruby glimmering. "The great war is upon us now. All other crowns are but gilded iron when the dark hand rises. We must summon fire that walks." Jon Snow's gaze flicked to Davos, searching for sense in a world tipping into legend. Davos wished he could hand him calm seas and sun-blazed decks, wished he could promise the world still obeyed mortal rules. Instead, he closed his fist round the wooden talisman and said, "We will fight, lad. Stormlander, Northerner, Crow, and free folk alike. We fight or we freeze. Simple as that." And there beneath towers rhymed in centuries of frost, fate braided itself anew. A crownless prince on ice, a crown-battered king of ash, and the whisper of dragons lost and dragons yet unborn. Outside the walls, night rustled like a beast uncoiling. But within the ring of flickering torches stood men whose hearts beat hot enough to melt kingdoms. Winter roared, and they roared back, not with songs or boasts, but with the iron promise of swords drawn in defiance of an endless dark that had forgotten the taste of flame. Snow clung to the wall like barnacles on a titan's hull, glimmering beneath the wan, white ghost of the moon. But on the courtyard flagstones beneath that monstrous sheet of ice, fires snapped and sputtered, defiant pinpricks set against the dark. Night's Watch brothers guided Stannis soldiers to barracks long unused, each man ordered to keep his cuirass buckled even as he slept. Horses stamped in the stables, their sweat turning to rime in moments. The smell of pitch hung thick. Barrels of it were stacked shoulder-high beside piles of kindling and spare spears. Davos Seaworth supervised the unloading of Manderley grain into the vaults below the Lord's Tower, and oversaw the apportioning of salted meat. Rattleshirt's scattered bones adorned a pike beside the main gate, Jon Snow's reminder that some victories required more than steel. Inside the armory, Jon met with Stannis, his cheeks raw with windbite. Between them lay a sheaf of tattered parchments, ranging reports, wildling sightings, whispers of shapes moving in the frostfangs. Tracks that ended abruptly beneath fresh snow. A ranger named Dywyn had brought back a blade of cracked obsidian found lodged in the eye socket of a dead elk, splinters shimmering like black glass tears. Jon placed it before Stannis. "Dragon glass," he said. "We stockpiled what we could after Lord Commander Mormont fell, but most caches lie buried beyond the wall." Stannis picked up the fragment, weighing its feather-light heft. Fire turned to stone. Better than steel, according to tales. Yet tales grow grander than truth, when sung by cowards. "Now, they do," Jon agreed. "But I have seen another shatter with such a blade. No coward's tale." A muscle worked in Stannis' jaw. "Ye. Then we mine the tales. If the weapon breaks, we break more from the rock." Jon spread a second parchment. Crude map of caves near Eastwatch by the sea, where obsidian veins twisted through crumbling shale. "Even a tenth the men could dig enough for arrowheads, if we keep forges burning." "Then dig we shall," Stannis said. He turned to Davos. "Send riders to Eastwatch. Lord Ricker will loan picks and sleds." "Men seen." Davos scratched a note. "At once, Your Grace." They moved next to fortifications. Stannis listened without interruption as Jon detailed the dwindling garrison. 300 fighting brothers, half convalescent, many farm boys who had never swung more than a muckfork. "The wildlings camped in the gift outnumber us 5-1, Jon finished. "But they follow my command, for now. Mance Rayder is dead, yet his lieutenants test our resolve daily." Stannis motioned to Melisandre where she hovered near the hearth. Fiery hair, a flicker amid gloom. "And what says the Red Woman?" Her eyes reflected the brazier's glow. "I see flame devouring ice. I see a stag bright as sunrise standing atop a frozen grave. I see a man with a dire wolf's shadow, heart torn between duty and love. And I see darkness swirling about them all, like smoke about a dying torch." Jon frowned. "No prophecy feeds hungry men. We need timber for palisades, oil for fires, and spears enough for every wildling who'll wield one." Melisandre smiled thinly. "Prophecy kindles the hearts that carry those spears. But build, if building calms your mind." "The honor." Stannis set fist to table. "We will build. We will train. And when the dead come, we will kill them anew. Until then, prophecies wait." He dismissed the council and went to inspect the wall's inner rampart. Training began at dawn 2 days later. Brothers of the Watch formed ranks with northern levies in the shadow of the ice. Wildlings joined reluctantly. Spearwives with hair like rusted wire. A giant of a man named Boarhunt, whose fists could fell a tree. Haggard elders who remembered the last great winter and spoke of ice spiders big as hounds. Jon lined them before King Stannis, who arrived clad in mail buff to mirror shine, the fiery heart banner flapping behind him. "Your lives are your own," Stannis announced, voice harsh in the thin air. "If you wish to keep them, you will learn to stand as brothers beside men you once called foe. This wall does not care for old grudges. It cares only whether you stand when night falls." No wildling spat. None laughed. They met his stare with the same grim, silent oath he offered them, and training commenced. Axes thudded against straw dummies. Shields smashed shields. Archers loosed at painted targets, while rangers demonstrated the proper fit of dragonglass arrowheads sealed with resin. Sir Godry drilled pikemen in braced lines, cursing every soft step. Davos roamed the yards, praising small improvements. Binding a gashed hand here, a broken toe there. Maester Tybalt brewed willow tea to dull pain, while Melisandre watched from the battlements, red eyes drinking sparks that floated above the forges like fireflies frozen in orange glass. By week's end, the first omen arrived. A hunter stumbled through the west gate near midnight, eyes wild. He had ranged for hare along the milkwater, but found only silence. No bird song, no tracks, save a single set of prints, bare human feet blackened by frost. They led to a copse where the hunter discovered 6 corpses crouched round an unlit fire. Their heads sagged, throats slit. The snow around them bore no blood, only frozen dusting. When the man approached, their eyelids snapped open, iris crystals pale as moonlit glass. The hunter fled, chased by a wind that seemed to whisper his name in a dead child's voice. Jon led a sortie at dawn, Stannis at his side. They found the corpses, lifeless now, throats gaping, and burned them. But the prints remained, dozens of them radiating outward from the camp, too deep for fresh snow to conceal entirely. Tracks of the dead. That night, the horns atop the wall sounded twice. Rangers had sighted a moving line far beyond the haunted forest, torches flickering blue. No one sounded the third horn, yet every man felt it trembling in their chest, as though a frozen trumpet were buried inside. In Winterfell, Shireen bent herself to rule. She rose before the dawn bell and walked the battlements, counting watchfires. She held audience in the great hall, seated on the same plain bench her father had used, feet dangling inches above the stone. Crofters petitioned for seed grain, smiths for charcoal, soldiers for boots. She listened, nodded, consulted Maester Tybalt, then issued orders with a soft, steady voice that brooked no delay. Justin Massey, once Stannis' flamboyant knight, became her sword and shield, and found humility in the girl's gravity. One overcast afternoon, as biting sleet needled the keep, a rider from White Harbor galloped through the gate, cloak stiff with ice. Shireen met him in the yard. He bowed deep enough for his forehead to brush his mount's mane, and produced a scroll sealed with green wax. "Milady," he said, "Lord Wyman begs you open at once." Inside, the message told of raiders flying the flayed man, Dreadfort remnants marauding the shore villages on the Blazewater Bay, carrying off sheep and children both. The letter ended with a plea for swift justice and an offer of further grain against such a service. Shireen read it twice, then gave the scroll to Sir Justin. "We cannot empty Winterfell's garrison," she said, voice shaking only a little, "but we will signal clans near the stony shore. Sir Justin, write at once. The king's justice will ride with them." "Shall I lead, princess?" he asked. "No," she said. "I shall. My father would ride himself." She turned to Maester Tybalt. "Have you studied battlefield chirurgery?" The old man blinked. "Some, my lady. Leeches at Dragonstone taught me crude remedies. Pack your kit. We march at first light. Flayed men must not stand in the north while my father fights itself." She strode away before argument could form, though fear fluttered in her chest like a caged bird. That night, by candlelight, she wrote her father a letter describing the decision. She ended with, "I will be brave, as you have ever been, and I will protect our people until your return." Then she sanded the page, sealed it, and handed it to a raven keeper with instructions. "Fly swift, though storms darken the sky." At Castle Black, storms indeed darkened everything. Snow drowned the world in drifts as tall as ramparts. Fingers cracked beneath mittens. Joints ached at every swing of sword or hammer. Yet Forgas glowed day and night, pumping plumes like dragon breath into the air. Simultaneously, the obsidian mine near Eastwatch yielded treasure. Black glass nodules the size of fists, pried from frozen shale and ferried in sleds pulled by rangy dogs. One night Davos sat with Jon atop the wall. The air so cold his tears froze to lashes. They stared north, watching greenish ribbons of aurora ripple behind a veil of cloud. "My king believes you may be that prince in Melisandre's visions," Davos said. Jon exhaled a plume of white. "I believe in steel, and in walls 40 times the height of Winterfell. Prophecies are too heavy for bastards." "Maybe," Davos said, "but heavy swords kill foes when dropped from a height. Wear the weight, don't swing it. Jon chuckled at that. Below, tents clustered in haphazard circles. Wildlings huddled close to warmth, some creeping south overnights to forage farmers' stores. Jon patrolled daily, reminding them of their oath, take nothing that is not freely given. He punished looters with lashings, though each stroke cracked his own heart. He fed the bound men barley and onion stew afterward, reminding the camp that mercy did not sleep in winter. Stannis watched these judgments with a face carved from slate. He called Jon to his solar, once Bowen Marsh's office, now stripped of tapestries and heated only by a coal brazier. You rule them, Stannis said, yet you lash them like a lord. You cannot be both king and father of their new world. Jon folded arms. I promised them passage south in exchange for vows. I cannot break my word. Then I will break theirs, Stannis said. Oathbreakers earn death. You cannot kill half your army, Jon replied. Stannis' stare held iron. I killed my brother's rivals, my own nephew's father. Do you think I lack stomach? He leaned forward. But you are correct. I need them. So you will command them still. But remember, swords obey fear more swiftly than kindness. Jon left, uncertain which man was colder, the god-carved wall or the king below it. 3 nights later, when the moon hung pale as bone, the horns blew thrice. The sound rolled through the castle like thunder inside a tomb, shaking frost from joists, splintering brittle nerves. Men scrambled from bunks, half-armored, clutching weapons. Torches sparked along ramparts. Jon dashed up the inner stairs 2 at a time. On the wall's crest he found Bowen Marsh, face white as the snowscape beyond. Light in the forest, the first steward gasped. Shapes. Hundreds. Jon peered through a frosted looking-glass. At first he saw only darkness, then motion. Silent. Slow. Relentless. Figures moved beneath the branches, white against black, less like men than outlines of men cut from the night itself. Among them bobbed a taller form on an emaciated horse, its eyes radiant blue as heart flame. The horse left no prints. The rider's cloak fluttered though no wind stirred below. Jon's lungs emptied. Ready the fire arrows, he said. Stannis arrived with Davos and Sir Godry, each bundled in furs. They took in the sight through the glass one by one. 7 save us, Davos whispered. Stannis crossed his arms. 7 left us long ago. We save ourselves. He turned. Sound assembly. Below, bells rang. The yard flooded with men, torches, the reek of pitch. Wildlings roused children, herding them behind the wall's south gate with stock animals. Melisandre emerged onto the east parapet, crimson gown billowing though the wind up here threatened to tear lesser cloth from bone. Her ruby burned bright. Jon joined archers knocking dragonglass-tipped arrows wrapped in oilcloth. Torches lit the pitch-soaked cloth. Orange sparks cascaded. They waited. The shapes drew closer. First a line, then 2, then 3, a skirmish formation wider than Castle Black itself. Snow hissed beneath their tread. Jon felt each breath freeze inside him. Fingers numb despite deerskin gloves. Loose, he said quietly. Flaming shafts streaked across the night, trailing sparks. They fell among the whites, where they burst like meteors. Some corpses burst apart, bones clattering ice. Others staggered, limbs dropping before they lurched on. Silent still. The tall rider turned its head up toward the wall. Blue eyes narrowed. Stannis bellowed another order. Pitch bombs sailed out, smashed, roared into flame. Black smoke rolled. But the front ranks of the dead met the fire, and unmindful, walked through. Cloaks flaming. Behind them the snow darkened, not crimson, but soot-gray. Flames guttered without kindling. Smoke dissipated as if sucked into lungs that could not breathe. Melisandre lifted arms. She began to chant in a tongue foreign as moonrise over Valyria. Her ruby pulsed with each syllable. The embers of the shattered pitch bomb stirred, coalescing into twisting serpents of orange that slithered along the snow toward a central point, where the dead massed most thick. There, they entwined and rose, forming an arching staircase of fire. Whites touched it and fell, shattered. Yet each corpse that fell grew another behind it. Soon the staircase sagged under weight of death. Jon realized then, no wall of flame would last when confronted by infinite flesh. "Scorpions!" he shouted. Ballistae fitted to the rampart swiveled. Iron bolts tipped in dragon glass loaded. Crews heaved, arms straining. Triggers snapped. Bolts howled into the swarm, punching through 2-3 bodies before lodging. Dead things split like rotten gourds, blackened ichor hissing on snow. Yet the tall rider remained untouched, guiding its horde with silent gestures. Jon drew Longclaw, the Valyrian steel shimmering silver and torchlight. "Open the inner gate," he ordered. Bowen Marsh's eyes bulged. "You'll let the dead inside?" "I'll meet them outside," Jon said. "If we fall back within, they'll pile before the gate until the wall stands on dead alone. We break their vanguard in the open." Stannis grasped Jon's forearm. "You and I," he motioned to Sir Godry. "Bring the cavalry." The inner gate shuddered open. Jon, Stannis, Davos, and 100 mounted northerners thundered through, hooves chiseling icicles from the tunnel vault. Beyond, the night swallowed them. Torchlight fluttered across helms like fleeting ghosts. They formed line abreast on the cleared road, wildling skirmishers running ahead, casting flaming javelins. The enemy met them 100 yards out, a pale tide. Jon's first swing felt like cutting packed snow until the White's head rolled, blue embers sputtering. Stannis' sword, Lightbringer only in rumor, cleaved torsos with methodical precision. Davos fought at Jon's flank, shortened fingers curling around a shield gripped in agony but unbroken. The charge stalled within a heartbeat, horses screaming as icy claws ripped girths. Riders toppled, dragged beneath thrashing hooves. Jon cried out, urging his men to regroup, but the dead pressed from every side. He glimpsed the tall rider, now dismounted, striding unhurried toward them. Obsidian spear pointed like a needle of winter itself. Longclaw met the spearhead with a clang that rattled Jon's teeth. Sparks flew, white-blue, as steel met a metal Jon did not know. The Odor's mouth opened in a soundless snarl. It thrust again. Jon parried, but the force drove him to a knee. Then Stannis was there, sword punching the other's spear aside. Frost blossomed up his blade, turning steel to rime. Yet Stannis pressed, teeth bared. The other retreated 2 steps, then spun, spear sweeping for Stannis' neck. Jon leapt, catching the blow on Longclaw's flat. Both blades screeched. From behind them, a roar erupted. Boar Hunt the wildling, swinging a war maul fashioned from a wagon axle. He crashed through Whites, scattering limbs. His swing met the other side, but the maul glanced as though hitting marble. The giant wildling stared in disbelief, an instant before the other's spear pierced his throat in a whisper of breaking ice. Rage ignited behind Jon's ribs. He lunged, slashing. Stannis mirrored him opposite. The other's spear spun, parried, thrust, faster than thought. Yet the two circled, flanking, forging an unspoken rhythm. At last Stannis feinted high. The other lifted his weapon. Jon drove Longclaw under its arm into translucent armor. The blade sank. Frost spiderwebbed from the wound. The other looked down almost curiously, then shattered, fragments spraying like glass shards glittering against the night sky. A wail rose from the dead, half froze mid-lunge, heads canting as if hearing a distant horn, then dropped lifeless. Others staggered back, cohesion wobbling. On the wall, horns blew twice, then once more in quick succession, a signal for the reserves. Flaming barrels catapulted outward, exploding among the retreating tide, incinerating clusters. Stark and Baratheon cavalry regrouped and charged anew, slamming the wavering undead line until it crumpled. When dawn bled gray behind the hills, the field below Castle Black steamed with smoldering remains. Men moved through wreckage, dragging the injured, piling the silent. Davos leaned on his sword, shoulders heaving. Stannis wiped frost from his brow, gaze scanning for new threats. Jon knelt by Boar Hunt's body, eyes closed. "Burn him with honor," he said. Melisandre descended the steps, bare feet blackened with soot. Yet she walked as though upon warm sand. She surveyed the carnage, the shards of the shattered other melting to vapor at her feet. Her ruby pulsed slow. "The first trial passes, but the greatest lies beyond," she whispered. Stannis turned, blood-crusting hair at his temple. "How many more?" he asked. "As many as there are stars," she replied. "But now they know something new, that fire walks arm in arm with ice-forged steel." "They will counter," Stannis said. "Yes," she agreed, "but so will we." Ravens winged south that afternoon bearing news of the victory, but snow stifled their flight. Most were blown off course or frozen mid-wing beat. Only one reached Winterfell's rookery. Shireen read the message as her column rode north along the King's Road, ice crackling beneath hooves. She tucked it inside her cloak, eyes shining despite fear. She thought of her father standing beneath a sky of falling stars, wielding a sword hot with glory, and she whispered a prayer to every god she knew. Her band numbered 100 riders, 20 archers, 25 manderly foot, and a small company of mountain clan spearmen keen to carve Bolton flesh. They crossed the last river at dusk, camped inside a half-ruined holdfast where Theon Greyjoy once hid. Wolves howled through the night, children clung to mothers, mothers clung to axes. Shireen lay awake listening, not frightened of wolves, but of silence after. For silence meant flayed men might prowl nearby, knives eager for new cloaks of skin. They reached the mouth of Blazewater Bay at dawn and found black smoke curling above the thatched roofs of Drenchweed Village. Sir Justin ordered scouts forward. They returned pale. Homes ransacked, bodies staked in the square, sigils of House Bolton painted in blood on broken doors. Shireen dismounted before the carnage. She knelt by a child, no older than 6, eyes glazed, throat cut. Her breath hitched. Justin moved to lift her away, but she raised a hand. "See," she murmured. "Understand." She stood, wiping tears with a gloved thumb. "They fled inland. We ride." Tracks led into frosted scrubland east of the coast. The pursuit lasted 2 hours before they sighted the Reavers, a ragged band of 30, driving a wagon loaded with sacks and still squirming children wrapped in burlap. "Dot-dund." Bolton banners drooped above them. Justin signaled. Spearmen spread in a crescent. Archers notched arrows. Shireen rode to the fore. "Yield," she called. "Lay down arms and stand trial within Winterfell's walls." The Reavers jeered. Their leader, a wiry man with half a nose, spat. "Trial for flaying. Ask your father how many skins he'll need by winter's end." An arrow answered, sprouting in his chest. Battle crashed like ice sheets colliding. Shireen watched as Justin led the charge, sword whistling. She felt sick every time a blade found flesh, yet she did not look away. In minutes, it was done. 2 Reavers fled. Archers felled one. The other vanished into birch trees. Children in the wagons sobbed. Shireen climbed up, cutting ropes with a dagger. "You are safe now," she told them. "The North remembers its own." One child with a missing ear whispered, "Are you a queen?" Shireen thought of her father standing beneath luminous auroras, of Jon Snow brandishing Longclaw, of Maester Tebald's trembling quill. "No," she said quietly, "just a girl who will not flinch." They burned the dead, buried the innocents, and escorted the children home. Word of Shireen's deed flew on every winter wind. When she returned to Winterfell a fortnight later, peasants gathered at the gatehouse, hailing her as Lady of Flame and Snow. She blushed behind a scarf but thanked each by name. Inside the hall, she found a second raven from the wall, this one bearing sorrow. Sir Godry had fallen in a skirmish 3 nights past, his chest pierced by an icy shard. Stannis wrote of funeral pyres that throbbed like orange hearts beating against endless night, of Jon Snow planning a strike north to retrieve more dragonglass, of how they might hold if winter's fury doubled again. Shireen folded the letter and carried it to her chamber. She lit a candle, held the flame to the edge of the parchment, and watched fire curl the paper until only the words "remember, who we are" lingered in unchanged ink. amid blackened ash. Remembering became everything in those days. At Eastwatch, Davos oversaw boats hauling obsidian crates to shore, their hulls crunching through ice floes. He drafted quartermasters, taught them smuggler tricks to hide blades in false barrels. He cursed when rations spoiled, laughed with lads too young to shave who bragged they'd spear a giant. At night he stared at the sea, thinking of his sons lost at Blackwater, of the pale tide of corpses new tides might carry south. In the haunted forest, Jon Snow led 12 rangers to recover lost obsidian caches. Among them rode a woman with hair red as a sunset cut short by clouds. Sigrid his cousin, she claimed, though loss had rubbed names thin. They found old caches buried under collapsed tunnels, others smashed by frost heave. They fought wights that sprang from root-snarled earth, eyes burning blue. Jon slew each with long claw, counted every blow twice. Once for the living soul stolen to make the corpse, once for the dead his father could not protect. And atop the wall, Stannis stood nightly, gazing north where faint luminescence pulsed beyond the horizon. He held his sword before him until frost silvered the crossguard. Melisandre came often, urging him to accept his destiny. Yet he answered only, "Destiny bends to the man who outlasts it." She would smile, half pride, half sorrow. One eve she told him of the girl queen riding against flares, of burning wagons and freed children. "Your line proves stout steel," she said. "Fire runs in her blood too." He looked away, face rigid. "She must harden, or she will break." Melisandre's laughter sounded like crackling logs. Glass forged of sand and lightning becomes no less true for being brittle. It cuts deeper than iron, if guided by steady hand. Stannis said nothing. Spring teased the world with a single sunrise of coruscating gold, then vanished behind clouds heavy as funeral stones. Yet that day birthed something new, a hope forged in the coals of endless night. Jon returned from his ranging bringing carts piled with obsidian. And, more startling, 2 giants, Mag Martundo Waig's kin, who towered twice the height of men and carried uprooted trees for clubs. They strode through Castle Black's gate, as though ducking into a child's playhouse, startling crows from rafters. The wildlings cheered. Brothers of the Watch stared, slack-jawed. Stannis stepped forward, chin high, and addressed them in the old tongue he'd practiced since Melisandre taught him a prayer. The giants listened, snorted like bulls, then pounded fists on chests, a sign of pact. With giant strength, new palisades rose outside the wall's gatehouse, timber beams lashed together in radiating spikes. Dragonglass arrowheads were affixed to scorpion bolts, stacks as tall as a grown man. Wildling children carried baskets of kindling. Nights grew colder still, yet fires burned brighter. One fortnight later, the next attack came, not from the north, but from within. A hand of Castle Black's night guard found a man hiding near the granaries, skin pale, eyes shimmering faint blue. He was Othel Yarwick's nephew, thought lost during a scouting patrol. He lunged when discovered, tearing at the guard's throat with nails turned black. The guard's screams roused the yard. Jon rushed, dagger tipped with dragonglass drawn, and struck the white through the breastbone. Frost cracked, body fell. But grain sacks were slashed. Spoils seeped out like sand in an hourglass. Enough to feed 20 men for a month, lost to rot. Sabotage. Jon ordered double watch, but 2 nights later the forge shed ignited, an oil jar shoved beneath bellows. Flames devoured half the stock of arrow shafts before brothers beat it down. In the aftermath, they found the culprit. An old wildling man who had lost 2 sons beneath pitch barrels in the first battle. Madness drove him. He claimed the fire would melt the wall, return him to his dead wife's arms. Jon wept as he pronounced the sentence. Death by rope, for the safety of all. Stannis attended the execution, gaze like an open grave. "Mercy kills more than swords," he said when it was done. "Perhaps," Jon answered, "but cruelty kills the man who wields it." Stannis did not reply. Messages from Winterfell arrived on Raven's wings, carrying news of increasing raids near the Dreadfort's ruins. Roose Bolton was rumored fled south. seeking alliances among Freys and Lannisters. Shireen maintained order, but her latest letter bore a smear of blood. "Sir Justin's," she wrote, "wounded leading a sally against raiders." She begged for healers skilled in treating fever. Davos left Eastwatch with 2 Septon healers within hours, marching across the frozen Gift to reach her. On that journey, Davos found villages deserted but intact, as though inhabitants woke, saw a shadow on the horizon, and walked out together, leaving fires still burning. He felt eyes in the trees, but nothing stirred besides wind. He reached Winterfell to discover a plague of chills sweeping the garrison, an illness that turned lips blue and froze blood in capillaries. Maester Tybalt brewed a broth of garlic, honey, and willow bark. Davos ordered extra braziers in the courtyard, smoke piercing the air like swords of gray light. Shireen sat at Justin's bedside each dawn, reading histories of Nymeria's voyage, though eyes blurred. Davos placed a hand on her shoulder. "Rest, princess. I will rest when the north lies quiet," she whispered. Justin survived, barely. Others did not. Shireen oversaw funerals herself, lighting pyres in the godswood. She offered prayers to the old gods, the new, the red god, any who listened. Snow fell, hissing in the flames. From Winterfell's east tower, one could glimpse the far ridge where the King's Road vanished into storm. Shireen often stood there, scanning for ravens' silhouettes. Each day she asked, "Any word?" One crisp morning at dawn, a raven arrived bearing only one line in Stannis' terse hand: "Marching soon. Pray for dawn." At Castle Black, the preparations finished. Stannis called his commanders to the Icejar. Giants loomed behind him, twin monoliths of muscle. Wildlings formed ragged ranks, spears raised. Black brothers interspersed, shields overlapping those of freer folk. Stannis addressed them. "The enemy gathers beyond that forest. Tomorrow we ride to meet them where the earth rises into the gorge, where we can break them against rock and ravine. We march at dusk. We fight through night. We hold until light. If light fails, we burn until we forge our own." "Neo." Melisandre stepped forward, holding high a branded stave topped by a copper bowl filled with oil. She struck flint. Flame blossomed crimson, unnatural bright in the gloom. She lifted her voice in a hymn of our lore. Some knelt. Some looked away. But all felt heat pulse, the promise of warmth against eternal night. Jon found Stannis afterward, inspecting his destrier's girth, strap. "Dote duel. You ride in the van. I lead it," Stannis said. "If I fall, you pull the line." Jon frowned. "Better I ride where the wildlings can see me." Stannis studied him. "You fear being named king as much as I fear losing the crown. So keep it. We stand side by side tomorrow as brothers." He extended a gloved hand. Jon clasped it. "Brothers, then." "Until dawn," Stannis said. Evening crept like ink. The column assembled. Cavalry first, giants next dragging sleds bearing barrels of pitch. Infantry in winter leathers. Archers with quivers of dragonglass. Jon rode Ghost's pale brother, a gray mount named Shadow Fall. His breath plumed silver. Stannis took point, the burning stag banner breaking the darkness ahead. They crossed the Milkwater by a natural ice bridge, wind shrieking through cracks. Beyond lay a valley, where cliff walls pressed close. The gorge, narrow enough that dead hordes could not flank easily, wide enough to maneuver. They arrived an hour past moonrise. Giants planted crude barricades, engineers poured pitch trenches, archers scaled stone outcroppings. And they waited. The first hint came as a ripple in the long grass of a frozen meadow, though no breeze stirred. Frost mist curled upward. Then came the sound, not footsteps, but a soft, collective crunch, like the snapping of distant twigs. A white line materialized beneath the stars, stretching end to end across the valley mouth. They advanced, silent, endless. Stannis raised his sword. Flaming arrows arced. The night erupted in fire. Battle became nightmare. The pitch trench roared, painting dead faces orange. Still they clambered through flame. Giants swung oak clubs, each sweep smashing dozens. Archers knocked, loosed, reached for more until fingers bled. Jon fought atop a low ridge, carving with Longclaw. Every other that fell shattered bone ice corpses around it, but more stepped over. Hours blurred. Moon dipped. Stannis rallied at the center, sword rhymed but unbroken. A spear of pale crystal pierced his left pauldron. He snapped it off, blood freezing in the wound. Davos ran fresh torches forward, igniting spilled pitch. Wildlings howled war songs, older than the wall. Yet still the dead advanced. Melisandre stood behind the lines, chanting, ruby blazing Kadawar. She cast handfuls of red powder into torches. Sparks soared skyward, forming a vortex of burning motes that coalesced into the silhouette of a great fiery heart above the battlefield. Warmth washed outward, steam hissing from snow. Dead flesh ignited where the glow touched. For a heartbeat, hope surged. Then a horn sounded from the far ridge, not man-wrought, but deeper, like glacier shifting. The heart's shape wavered. From the shadows rode 5 others upon gaunt steeds, their armor reflecting starlight. They spread across the field, spears raised. Frost swirled around them, snuffing flames. Dragon glass arrows flew, most shattered against invisible force, yet one struck a steed's flank. The beast exploded into shards, but the rider leapt, landing light as smoke. It advanced toward Stannis. Jon chased, Longclaw trembling in his grip. But another intercepted, spears slicing for his head. He ducked, parried, frost feathered his blade. They circled in deadly silence, only the hiss of ice meeting Valyrian steel. The field tilted, vision swimming. Jon drove forward, feinted high, cut low. The other blocked, but misjudged the Valyrian edge. Longclaw bit its wrist. Frost exploded, the spear fell. Jon pressed, sliding steel through chest. The other crumbled, yet pain lanced Jon's thigh where shards of ice stabbed through mail. He fell to one knee, world spinning. Stannis fought 2 others alone now. His sword swung slower. Davos rushed to flank but stumbled amid corpses. Giants roared, but dead weight dragged them down like ants felling an elk. Melisandre's chant rose to a shriek. She flung both arms wide. The burning heart above burst, raining embers bright as noon. Where they fell, whites erupted in columns of orange fire. 2 embers struck the back of the nearest other. It staggered, blue eyes flaring white, then shattered. Stannis took the opening, decapitating the remaining foe with a roar. A hush swept the field like sudden calm after storm. Dead still scrabbled at feet, but their unity broke. They scattered, twitching aimless. From the north, a deep rumble rolled, an avalanche launching in the Frostfangs. No. The wall itself groaned under strain, yet the horizon remained dark. The dead retreat began, a tide reversing. They melted into the forest, leaving shards. Stannis held his sword high, though shoulder bled unchecked. Men raised voices. Cheers cracked the frost air. Jon limped to Melisandre. What was that? Faith, she breathed, exhausted. Faith given flesh. He stared at the scorched valley, at burning corpses casting twisted shadows. Was it enough? For tonight, she said. Dawn approaches. Indeed, pale light fingered the eastern clouds. Men slumped where they stood, tears freezing on cheeks, but alive. Stannis lowered his sword, wincing, but eyes shone. Flint struck and sparking. We held, he said. For now, Jon echoed. Davos arrived, binding a cut across his brow. We have wounded your grace, but we stand. Stannis regarded the ravaged field. Then we bury the dead, burn them. We carve new arrows. And we hold again, as many nights as winter dares test us. He sheathed his sword with a click that seemed louder than battle's end. Jon looked north, beyond the trees, into darkness pregnant with silent menace. He felt both dread and fierce resolve. They will come again, he whispered. Stannis nodded. So will we. Above them, the rising sun painted the wall rose gold, bleeding light across ice, as though forging a blade 100 leagues long. For a brief, fragile heartbeat, it seemed enough to halt any night. Men basked in that warmth, remembering fields of summer wheat, the taste of fresh apple. A lover's laugh carried on lazy air. Then clouds swept across the sky, snuffing the sun. But even as gray reclaimed the heavens, the memory of gold lingered, warm ember cupped within every breast. A spark the night had not quenched. And deep within Winterfell's keep, Shireen Baratheon lit candles in every window. Their glow promised to the north that hearts remained alight, though the world lay under winter's spell. Somewhere between those two bastions, castle of stone, castle of ice, Roose Bolton crept south, seeking alliances in shadow. Cersei Lannister sharpened grievances, Freys whispered of weddings undone. But in those hours none of that mattered. Only the wall stretched east to west, crowned in sunrise memory, and the men and girls and giants who dared tell death to wait. And so the story pressed on, as all stories do, through silence deeper than snowdrifts, through sighs of lost souls, through sparks that would one day roar into dragonfire or gutter into ash. Yet for this breath, on this morning after deepest dark, the living drew a line in the snow and said, "Here, no farther." And the winter wind, for the first time in 1,000 years, seemed to hesitate.